Hey guys, welcome back to the String Things channel. Today's agenda, I'll be wrapping up 2022, sharing my January makes, and at the end, I want to go over some knitting plans with you guys. But before we jump into today's agenda, I thought a little reintroduction or brief history is in order. I want to say thank you to everyone who has subscribed to my channel, whether it's been from the beginning or even just yesterday. It means a lot to me. My name is Melissa, or Mel. I'm a stay-at-home mom living in Vancouver, BC, Canada, and I have a 2-year-old daughter named Darcy. I started knitting late 2019, and in early 2020, I found out I was pregnant, and I did knit some baby items, but that year was mostly just enjoying pregnancy, spending time with my husband, also pandemic, so working from home, all of that. 2021, it took me about, let's say, I think 2 or 3 months after Darcy was born before I was able to pick up the needles again. But that year was mostly a year of experimentation, still trying to figure out what kind of knitting I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be garments, but I wasn't sure my level and exactly which ones to knit. So I feel that 2022 was my first solid year of knitting, also because Darcy's schedule was much more consistent, free time was more predictable, and knitting definitely did become a dominant hobby for me. 2022 is also when I officially became a stay-at-home mom. So I initially took a 12-month maternity leave. At the 12 months, I didn't feel ready to go back to work. We also hadn't found any daycare for Darcy. So I asked for an extension to an 18-month leave, and which brings us to March 2022, where I handed in my resignation letter. So I was working as a project coordinator at a forensic consulting engineering firm. And so I never actually went back to work after Darcy was born, after I took my leave. And I was also at that point, well, I knew I wasn't going to be going back to work, but I definitely was feeling like my vocabulary was lacking. Having been home with a baby and toddler for quite some time, I was, and add to the reduced social interactions thanks to COVID lockdowns, I was definitely feeling very weak conversationally. So I saw starting a channel as an opportunity to not only be a more active member of the knitting community, but also a means for me to speak like an adult, as funny as that might sound. I choose to make videos because I enjoy talking about my knitting, and also it's a way for me to maintain and build up speech and presentation skills. So that brings us to now. So it was August 2022, I started this channel. It's now January 2023. Still lots to learn, still lots to room to grow. Okay, that's the quick and dirty. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the comments below. So let's jump into today's agenda. When I last left you guys in my December podcast episode, I was working on a couple of whips, which I have since finished. For Christmas, I knit Darcy a Moby mini sweater. And if you follow me on Instagram, then you have seen a few photos of this. This is knit using all We Are Knitters yarn. It's not sponsored or anything. I bought that yarn, I had some of it in my stash. And the yarn I used is the Touch Me Mohair held with the baby wool. And this label says Sprinkle Fantasy for the colorway, but I think it's also just called Rainbow on the website. But it's not very rainbow because, well, the colors in it aren't the full spectrum of the rainbow. But this sweater is mostly alpaca yarn then, and it makes it super soft. Since my last video of the everything I knit in 2022, I have added elastic thread into the collar. And that's just to help it hold its shape over time. There's also a lot of, it's a bit rougher putting a sweater on and off a toddler because they, especially Darcy's at the age where she wants to dress herself. So she really just grabs the sweater to put it on and off. And with it being mostly alpaca, alpaca's a bit, it's more drapey than wool. So I feel like it's not, it doesn't lend as much structure to the collar as a full wool yarn would. Although I think, you know, people still add elastic threads into collars of sweaters that are, you know, 100% wool. So kind of depends on how the collar is fitting you and how you how rough you are with your sweaters, I suppose. This is a new thing for me to add elastic thread in. I feel like I have spoken quite a bit about this one because of, you know, a couple podcast episodes as well as the 2022 knit video. So I don't want to be redundant, but oh, I did want to mention the yardage, how much yarn I ended up using for this. And I forgot to grab my notebook, so one sec, guys. So I had originally bought 9 balls of this guy. I don't know why, because that's not how much you need for this sweater. And it's also not enough for an adult size Moby. So I have no idea why I bought that much. I probably had another project in mind, but that idea has completely escaped my memory. So I used 5 balls of the baby wool, and no idea how much I used of the Touch Me Mohair because I had it left over in my stash from another project. So I just it didn't have a ball band on it anymore, so I don't even know if it was full ball or if you even grabbed more than one. So yeah, and I held it with strand mohair, but that's not what's written in the pattern. I did that because even though I got gauge, the yarn, the fabric looked a little bit holey or gappy, so put in the mohair to fill in the gaps. It also just makes it really nice. I think it looks a lot better with mohair, in my opinion. Yeah, and I wrote here in my book, no mods. So other than adding a strand of mohair, I knit exactly as the pattern instructed, and I knit size 2 to 3 years. It is a little bit big on Darcy. Darcy is, she is 2, but she's a bit slender for her age. So she's about 50th percentile for weight, but for height, she's about 70th percentile. So she's long and skinny. But that's fine because hopefully, unless she has a tremendous growth spurt, she'll hopefully be wearing this in the coming fall, winter months. Okay, moving on. The other item I was working on in December was a Sophie shawl for myself. I made the largest size. Here's my little Sophie croissant. Sorry, I don't speak French, and that probably came off really weird. But here it is. Also show this in my 2022 video. And no, I haven't washed it yet. I know I said in my previous video that I hadn't washed it because I've been wearing it, but you know what? I don't even think I wore it once this week, so I probably could have washed it and been fine without it for a couple days. So maybe what I'll do is I'm gonna finally wash it. This is knit up with Drops Soft Tweed. There we go. It's a nice warm charcoal with the neps are kind of a warm brown, camel-y, gray colors in there. And I had overestimated how much yarn I would need to make this shawl. So I used 4.5mm needles, and I don't know what my gauge is. I didn't gauge swatch. I just kind of took a chance because it's a shawl. Like, how wrong can you be? But I think even before blocking, my shawl is just about bang on the dimensions for the size large. And I use exactly 4 balls of yarn. I had originally purchased 7 because for some reason that's how much I thought I would need. I think I just ended up knitting at a looser gauge than I had planned for. And it worked out so well that I had like this much yarn left. So I have 3 balls left, which I'm probably just going to make another shawl. So I'll just have a smaller version, either, keep it for myself when I don't want to wear as big of a shawl, scarf, or maybe Darcy will wear it, or I will gift it to someone. Yeah, but no plans on working on this right away because I've got other things I want to do, and more on that later. So that wraps up December, wraps up 2022. I can now close that year. And for January, I have a couple items to share. They are going under as 2023 knits, but I'm kind of cheating because these were started in 2022. So back in October, I had cast on fever, and I must have cast on at least 4 things at that time. But if you've been following, then you know I made a Chantilly cardigan. I knit it, frothed it, knit it again. So that took up most of my October, November, and I was knitting a stuffed animal for Darcy for her birthday in October. So that's what pretty much took up my end of fall knitting. But my first January FO is my Marseille sweater. And I'm sorry, I'm not wearing it right now because I was way too cozy in this cardigan, which I forgot to say. I am wearing I just call it my brioche cardigan, but the pattern I used, it's a free pattern from Yarnspirations or Patterns. And the original pattern is written up for a cotton yarn, but I used a wool acrylic blend, mostly acrylic, because I just wanted something thick and woolly. And yeah, I was just too comfortable, and I liked how it looked with my outfit. And Darcy was painting today, so I really did not want to get paint and things on my white sweater. But here it is. I'll insert some footage of me actually wearing it. But if you follow me on Instagram, you would have also seen my reel on this. And if you watched long enough, then I have my silly dance at the end because, I don't know, just felt like it at the time. Since I photographed and made that reel though, I did decide to add elastic thread into the collar of this one. So it is in there, kind of tucked inside layer. And because this is a wool alpaca blend, so again, like I said before, had it been maybe more 100% wool, would it have more structure? But I also realized that the collar was kind of sitting away from my neck in the back, and I was worried about that getting worse over time. So I added in elastic thread, and if you're in the Vancouver area, my thread I just got from the fabric store, Dresso. It's over on Hastings Street, and it's really inexpensive there. You can buy it by the meter. I might have paid $2 for, I don't know, a couple meters or something like that. I think I did my elastic just a little bit too snug, but not that snug, like maybe it's like a centimeter too snug. But I like how it looks. It's very close fitting. It's not too different from what you would see in my Instagram reel. The difference is how the back of the neck looks, which I don't think you really see much of that in my reel anyways, but it's nice and clean. And if I wear a t-shirt such as something like this, it would cover that, so you wouldn't be able to see what kind of shirt I'm wearing underneath. So this one is knit up in all in drops Lima, just the white and black colors. And the only thing I don't like about this sweater, which is on me, and I don't know, for whatever reason, it's like one shoulder is better than the other. So my German short rows are uneven, and it's more noticeable when I'm wearing it because with the drop shoulder construction, the weight of the sleeve really pulls and spreads out the stitches. So it looks really uneven and open and holy. Look, there we go. This is the bad shoulder. And I think what happened was that I did my turning stitch, and the stitch immediately after that, I was pulling the yarn way too tight, and which resulted in really uneven tension throughout my short rows or at the turning stitch point. The other side is not, wait, which side is the good side? Oh, this is the better side. And yeah, and then maybe I made the sleeves a little bit too long, and maybe I shouldn't have blocked them out this wide, but I like a big wide cuff, especially for a loose fitting sweater like this. And the amount of yarn I used also used way less than I purchased. Let's see, is this one in my book? Yes, it is. So I ended up using, what did I write here? Okay, so I put it in meters for whatever reason. Oh no. Okay, so I used about 10, so like 9.5 balls, which they're 50 grams each of the white. And I used about 2 balls, not even, of the black yarn for my sweater. So it's about 1,000 meters of white and 200 meters of black is what I used for my sweater. But big reason why my yardage is quite different from the pattern yardage is that my gauge is quite different. So in terms of like stitches, the pattern is 21 stitches per 4 inches or 10 centimeters. Mine was 20 stitches, so not too far off. But for row gauge, the pattern gauge is 32 rows, and mine was 28. So with that big of a difference, I did have to adjust the number of rows I did between my black stripes. So I decided to keep the black stripes the same number of rows as the pattern because I liked how it looked in my swatch. So I reduced the number of rows of white in between those. And then I had to really count how many rows to do, like for my sleeves and stuff, so that I didn't end up with a super long sweater. Where this, became not quite a problem, but something I had to think about was picking up stitches for my sleeves. So because I had a different gauge, I also had a different pickup ratio. So I couldn't use a ratio that's used in the pattern for picking up stitches around the armhole. So I calculated that based on my washed and blocked gauge swatch. And then I had a very different stitch count for around the sleeve. So mine was I think it was at least like 15 stitches less, if not more. That's how different mine ended up being. And then because there are short rows also in the beginning, not quite to make a kind of like a sleeve cap, but I think they're used for when you wear the sweater, because the stripes are made to kind of line up with the stripes on the body. So the short rows are used to kind of help them line up horizontally across. I probably could have really thought about, okay, well, how many short rows are actually done in the pattern, and then calculate with my row gauge how many short rows I should do, but I just didn't care enough to do that. So I just did the short rows until I kind of like got all the way around, and it worked out fine. When I wear it, the stripes look mostly horizontal, so I guess I lucked out that way. But I think also because I was using my own ratio for picking up stitches, I'm just gonna take a wild guess, maybe that really helped my short rows, but I could be completely wrong with that thought. Yeah, I've already worn this a number of times. I really like it. It's really comfortable. It is a little bit tricky with rolling up my sleeves. I tend to like roll them so that like I can tuck the fabric in, because the cuff is so big it doesn't actually sit snug around my arm. I also have really skinny arms, so when I'm washing the dishes or cooking or whatever, I have to really make sure I pull all the fabric up like at my elbows. And yeah, that is my Marseille sweater. Okay, so my next finished object for January is something I drafted myself, and it's a little skirt for Darcy. So in my video way back, I think I had like a sort of a knitting plans video. I honestly can't remember how far back it was. It might have been the video where Darcy didn't want to nap, so she became a special guest. Maybe it was that video. I don't know. This is also knit up in Drops Lima. Yeah, I had a real Drops Lima purchasing moment in summer 2022. It's not quite a circle skirt, but it's definitely based on that. Hello. I didn't want it to be quite a full circle skirt because I thought it was going to be like too much volume around her. There are short rows in the back, and I swear guys, so like I can do short rows properly, because my short rows, honestly, like I can't really see, oh there's some, like my short rows on this are so much better. I can't, oh there we go. Anyways, my short rows on this are so much better than my Marseille sweater, so I am capable of doing them properly. I just messed up on my sweater, I guess. But yeah, I kind of used a pair of her leggings and just like some pants of hers to figure out how many short rows to do. I just kind of figured out how much I wanted to raise the back and think about like her diaper butt. She's still in diapers. And what I did for the waistline, so there is an elastic band in the waist. If I stretch it, maybe you'll be able to see. It's hard to see actually. Oh, I can see more this side. Anyway, so that white bit there is the elastic band. I think it's probably like 3/4 inch. I don't know if it's a full inch. So what I did is I did a provisional cast on in the round, worked I don't know, something like 6 rows, worked a row of purl stitches, and then worked another 6 rows. So the purl row really helps with creating a nice clean line. It also helps the fabric naturally fold over. And then I had the lovely task of, I prepared my elastic band. So I'd sewed the two edges together and I put them in like the little casing that I had knit up. And then I had to do some knit two togethers with the kind of like the inside of the band and the outside of the band. And that was so fiddly. But I stuck through it because I was like, you know, I've started this. I want to see if this works out. So that was probably the most, no, that wasn't the most fiddly part. My provisional cast on that I did, the type of provisional cast on I did was over another cable. And that just, yeah, I don't think I would recommend that in the round for this size of round anyways. Yeah, that drove me crazy. So that was the most fiddly part. The next most fiddly part was encasing the elastic band into the waistline. And then I did an increase round, and then I think I did an even round, and then I did my short rows, and then I just worked stockinette all the way to the bottom until I got to a length that looked good on Darcy because she actually tried it on, which was really helpful. And then again used a purl row and did a nice clean hem at the bottom. So I finished it off with, I didn't like bind off the edge and then sew that edge to the inside of the skirt. I did it like as I went. You kind of like grab a loop from the skirt and you kind of like bind off as you go. I didn't think about how I was going to explain that part, so that was probably really poorly described. But anyways, this is the inside of the skirt, and this is the outside, and it looks very clean. I think I did a good job, so there is Darcy's little skirt. In terms of length, I don't know how far past her knee it goes, but that was the goal, was to go past her knee. And this, having been cast on in October, I really wanted to make sure I finished it because, you know, who knows how long she's going to be this waist size. So I definitely wanted to finish it and not let all that hard work of making this waistband go to waste. No pun intended. So that brings us to the end of January makes. Next, I wanted to touch on some knitting plans or goals that I have. And they're really only for the first quarter of the year, let's say. I can't set long-term knitting goals because maybe it's the Aries in me, but I get impulsive, or I see something on Instagram, or I get inspired, and then whatever I had said I was going to do, just... So, kind of an overall goal for the year is to reduce the amount of yarn I buy and work through my stash. I don't have a super large stash, and I like that. And I restrict myself to I have like a single metal cabinet from IKEA where I store all my animal fiber yarn. Let's not get into my other kinds of yarn. That's a different problem. But that cabinet is full. So, you know, I don't want to knit everything in my stash this year. That's going to be too much knitting. But I definitely want to make sure I knit as many projects that I plan to knit this year with the yarn I have. So one of my last purchases of yarn, so goes back to, I guess, Black Friday. Holskarn was having a Black Friday sale, and I bought a cone of yarn. I've always wanted to buy a cone of yarn, and the price, even with the exchange rate and shipping, was cheaper than me buying it from a store here in Vancouver. So I bought a cone of their super soft yarn, and I bought the color Conquer. And I had seen the yarn in person before, because I did actually have a chance to go to Wet Coast Wools, which is yarn shop on West 4th, and they have a wall of all the super soft yarns. So I wasn't just going based off how it looked online to pick this color. It is a lovely, rich, dark brown. And I'm going to hold this with some Drops Kids Silk. They're very similar. I'm like worried it's going to be too similar. Like sometimes I kind of like when the mohair strand is like a little bit darker, a little bit different than the base yarn. The silk core is a different color, so maybe that's going to help add some dimension there. So I bought this yarn because I just really want a brown, easy wearing, everyday kind of sweater. And I knew I wanted to make a raglan sweater. And I really like using a fingering weight yarn with a mohair or alpaca strand. But I wasn't quite sure which pattern I wanted to use. Originally I thought maybe I'll make another Autumn League pullover by Two of Wands. Then I thought, oh, maybe I'll make a lento. Then I was watching the Wool Needles Hands podcast. Her name is Taylor. And she was showing a pullover called the Eclair pullover. Not to be confused with the Eclair sweater that Laura Penrose Knits is, that's in testing right now. But the Eclair pullover is a raglan sweater, not a huge amount of ease, but what really drew me to it was the fact that the sides are open. And I thought that was a really cool look. Also, the way that it was styled in the photo is something that, I'd like to kind of copy and bring into my wardrobe, because I just bought kind of an oversized button-up shirt. And by having the sides open, that means my button-up will be able to kind of just like, fit nicely under the sweater. And I think it will create a nice line or silhouette, rather than if the sweater is too tight and you've got this baggy shirt underneath, there's like some weird bunching. And anyways, so I'm planning to make an Eclair pullover with that yarn. And when I'm going to cast that on, I don't know. So that goes into kind of my next goal or plan for this year, is to try to knit as monogamously as possible. So I mentioned this in my 2022 knits video, monogamously in the sense that, one item for myself and one item for Darcy. And, some people that might not work, some people it does. Since working on the Chantilly cardigan, because I was working on that one mostly monogamously, I have found that switching to this, style of knitting has brought some balance into my life. And balance in the sense that I haven't felt, a super or great urgency to be knitting all the time. And I don't want to use the word addiction or addict, but I think maybe you get at what I'm trying to say, is that even while I was with Darcy, I just was thinking about knitting all the time. And part of that was because I had, multiple projects on the go. I was definitely feeling a bit of like FOMO, like, oh my God, I need to work on something, so something gets closer to being done. With me working on, one, maybe two things at a time, it's going to sound silly, but wow, how much faster things get done when you just have one project to work on. We'll see how long that lasts. I do feel like I am worried that I'll hit like the stockinette body of a raglan or something like that, where there's a great body of fabric to knit up and I get bored and want to work on something else. We'll see. I'm also hoping that, I don't necessarily have to knit all the time. Like, wow, that maybe I'll actually sit down and think about content for future videos. Really think more critically about, well, how often do I want to release a podcast? And maybe I'll have some videos in between podcasts, only do podcasts monthly, have some sort of other content coming out, maybe do a vlog a month or something like that. I don't know. So, yeah, I want to knit kind of just when I feel like it and not put my pressure on myself. And so far, I mean, it's only January, it's the end of January, but so far I'm feeling pretty good about my knitting pace and knitting time. Also, I've added in another hobby. So I think I've mentioned before that no, I don't think I have mentioned it before. Anyways, I like sewing, but I haven't been able to do it for a long time because there's a lot of space needed, a little bit more setup required. And I had the privilege of using a serger in high school because I took clothing and textiles all throughout high school. And trying to sew garments without a serger to finish your edges is just, for me, like it's hard to do. Once you've used a serger, it's hard to not use one. And I got really lucky and I found a serger in the clearance section at Canadian Tire, of all places, which is kind of like a general hardware store, sports, fishing, like has kind of everything store, if you don't know what Canadian Tire is. It was in their clearance section for $150 and it's a Singer serger. So if you don't, so this is all like, ugh, get on with it. But anyways, I have that, and so I have bought a bunch of fabric, and come spring, summer, that is definitely what I want to be adding in when it's kind of too warm to knit. So that's also part of my goal, is to sew some garments and hopefully sew garments that will match my knits, and hopefully it's my knits that will let me wear those garments in some of the cooler months as well, because my issue with a lot of my clothing is that I have very seasonal clothing and I want a little bit more crossover. And that goes into what I want to be knitting next. Like after this Eclair pullover, I do have a Friday tee by Petite Knit plan, but I want to be thinking more critically and assessing my wardrobe more closely, and examining my wardrobe more closely, and looking at what are the actual gaps in my wardrobe. After being pregnant in 2020, and then it being pandemic and raising a child at home, I feel like I lost all like sense of style. I don't know, like what I wear now is, quite a bit different from what I wore before having a child. Because after Darcy was born, and I'm worried about, what's gonna get spit up on, vomited on, poop on, sorry, TMI. Or now that she's older, it's like crayon, felt, marker, paint, things like that. So I worry more about what's gonna like get dirty. But I want things that are more versatile, because the amount of time I get that I have to get ready and all of a sudden decide like, oh, let's go to the store, let's go to the park. I want it to be really easy for me to go into my closet and pick out outfits. And so that is something I really want to consider when I choose something to knit. So that may not necessarily be construction wise, but definitely yarn color. It turns out I actually wear a lot of neutrals, so I want to, stick with some neutrals and let, texture or, the beautiful color of the Chantilly cardigan, for example, let those bring a little interest to my wardrobe rather than, too many pops of colors and then, those things don't go with each other. But anyways, I think I have rambled on enough. On that subject, because I'm now looking at my table and also with part of my knitting plan. Okay, one last knitting goal plan thing. Refers to choosing knitting patterns. So it's very easy to look on Instagram when you're browsing and get really influenced by what other people are choosing and also what's new and shiny, what's hot this month. And knitting is, the long game. So I don't want to knit anything too trendy, but I also don't want to be spending too much on patterns when I have some great resources already on my shelf at home. And I'm referring to books and magazines that I have purchased, which actually have great patterns in them. And I always forget about them because they're on a shelf and, not in my phone on Instagram, for example. So one of the things I got late last year, well, I ordered this book. So this is Knit This from, you might know her on YouTube as Kutiva Kika, or she goes by Kika. I pre-ordered this in August from the Book Depository. Heard nothing about my purchase or any updates about when I would receive this. And then all of a sudden, I think it was December, I got a notification saying my book was on the way. So, for a good solid couple months, I was worried whether I was, lost money or should I refund? Will I even get a book? So yeah, this finally arrived. So, that and some line of magazines, that is what I want to utilize first. I want to check over those first before, buying another pattern. Okay, I'm really done this time, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Please subscribe if you'd like to stick around for my knitting journey. And until next time, guys, happy knitting. Bye.